So I have to admit, it's a little weird to talk about a process that I don't fully understand. Because even though writing is a part of my daily life, I don't know where it comes from. So the most dreaded and common question that authors get is, where do your stories come from? And we hate it because we have no idea where our stories come from. They come like anonymous gifts from the universe. And sometimes it's something as small as just a flash of an image or a whisper of a single line of dialogue. And sometimes it's just the question, what if? But it always starts with the spark. For Stephenie Meyer, when she wrote Twilight, it started with a dream she had of Edward laying in the meadow with the sun hitting his skin and it glittering right in the light. And love it or hate it, good on her for coming up with a new spin on a tale as old as vampires. Like, that is such a difficult thing to do. And whether you like sparkly vampires or not, kudos to her, because it's not easy to come up with new twists on things that have been around for hundreds of years. So I've always wanted to be a writer, always. When I was very little, I was a voracious reader, and I would write silly little stories. I thank God for VC Andrews because her stories got Gen X girls to pick up books, to read them. And regardless of how inappropriate it may have been for an 8, 9, 10, 11-year-old to be reading Flowers in the Attic or Heaven, it didn't matter. Because one, our parents didn't pay attention to what we were doing at any given time. They barely knew where we were. They were not concerned with what we were reading. But I just fell in love with books. And from there, it was just a natural progression for me to write. And in the 90s, I wrote the worst novel ever written. I stand by that to this day. It was horrible. I still have it. It is printed in a 3-ring binder that sits out in my son's office because I'm never going to get rid of it. And back then, we didn't have computers. So it was typed on a typewriter and then later a word processor. So it's not like I even have a digital copy of it that I could store. So the physical printed out pieces of paper sit on a shelf where no one can reach it without a chair. So no one's accidentally going to pull it down and read it because it's freaking awful. Awful cannot be salvaged. I could not take a single page from that book and turn it into something else. But I wrote a 100,000-word novel in my teens, and it taught me the work ethic of sitting down and putting your fingers on a keyboard. So it's a lesson that I will always be grateful for because it didn't matter that it sucked. It mattered that I did it. And because we didn't have computers, it wasn't easy to figure out how to become a published author back then. It wasn't, if you wanted to query an agent, once a year, they put out a printed book that you purchased for $50 in the mid 90s. So, $50 was a lot more money back then. And in it was a list of every literary agent that had submitted their information. Half of them didn't even take unsolicited queries. So they would put their names and information in this book, but don't send them anything because they're not interested. And that book was garbage. So I wasn't going to try, with that book too hard, and rightfully so, because I didn't know what I was doing. Any queries that I did send out, I got very polite form rejection letters, and it was fine. But I never stopped writing. I kept writing. And, nothing that I wrote back then was good enough. And that's fine because we learn by practicing. We learn by reading stories and watching stories and reading craft books and doing our own work to learn story structure, to learn pacing and plot points and how to avoid plot holes and all the things that go into the mechanics of it. That's all stuff that can be learned. But that spark, the story aspect of it, I honestly believe that's either something you have or something you don't. And it's a gift. It's a gift like any other gift. That is, like there are people who can spin plates, and there are people who can balance on high wires, and there are people who can make music. I can't do any of those things. And I guess you can learn to play an instrument, but if that's not a gift, if that's not a spark you have, you're only ever going to get so far with it because you won't have the drive to be better. You won't have the drive to be the best. So yeah, you can learn mechanically how to write a book, but if you have to ask where the ideas come from, this probably isn't the life for you, because we don't ask why. We just say, because we don't ask where they come from. We just say thank you. So in 2007, I had a blogger, and I used that blog to document the story I was working on because I knew it was something. I knew it was real. I knew this was the book that was going to get me there. I didn't know how. I didn't have a plan, but I knew that this was it. This was the one. And it was a story about a vampire hunter who fell in love with a vampire. I got a thing about vampires. I love vampires. So, unbeknownst to me at the time, there was an editor from a British publishing house that was reading my journey, that was following along. And I was teasing enough stuff in the book that she was interested. So when the book was done, she invited me to submit the book to Total eBound, which was a small British publishing house. So I didn't have to get an agent. I didn't have to figure out queries or any of that because the publishing house itself invited me to submit. And they accepted my book. And it needed a lot of work. But that's what editors do. And she cut that thing to the bone. I've never again seen so many notes in a Word document on things that needed to be fixed, things that needed to be changed. It was eye-opening, to be sure. And thank God for her, because she has taught me more mechanical editorial things than any book, any coach, anyone could have taught me. And she's also now my best friend, but we'll get there. So Sweet Dreams was edited and published and put out in 2008, and people bought it. They spent their money on a book that I had written. And it wasn't, I certainly didn't make a fortune. In fact, I barely made anything, but that wasn't the point. I never expected writing to support me monetarily, because even when I was young, I understood the concept of a mid-list author. Because if you think about it, if you walk into a Barnes & Noble, there are a million books. If you look on Amazon, there are billions. There are a billion books. How many authors can you name? Because most of us live here. The majority of authors do not make enough from their writing to support themselves as a career. And then there's another tier that just does. The Stephen Kings and the Colleen Hoovers, those are rare. They're so rare. And that's another thing, that if you come into this expecting fame and fortune, you're gonna have a real hard time, because it's not there. And you have to be okay with that. And I am okay with that. I've always been okay with that. There are times I wished for more, but we all do, right? Like, it's not, we all do. It's fine. Because I wanted my books in people's hands, and Total eBound got them there. I was getting reviews from people who loved it. People were telling their friends online about, have you read Sweet Dreams by Dakota Rebel? And they did, and it was lovely. And I was so proud of myself. I was so proud of myself for sticking with it, right? For putting in the work and taking the chance and doing this thing for myself. And then after Sweet Dreams came Hello, which was about a woman who fell in love with her secret admirer. But then I wrote a book that changed the trajectory of everything. It was the most important book I've ever written. And I stand by that statement, and I will forever. It was called To Hate and to Hold, and it was a male-male vampire romance, because, again, love the vampires. And I don't make it a secret that I write male-male romance. I don't necessarily flaunt it, but I do. I write male-male romance now exclusively. But back then, over the years, I've kind of mixed them in with my male-female romances, but male-male romance is where my heart lives. And I don't talk about it because I know that there are people out there who would have a problem with it for multiple reasons. But my life is blessed by the LGBTQ family and friends that I have surrounded myself with. And I am an ally, of course I'm an ally, but I'm also their mom and their best friend. And their ex. And so I have in real time people who can read my books for me and give me feedback and make them authentic to their experience. And I think that's why when people do find my books, they resonate with them or they appreciate them because they come from a place of actually knowing the struggles, actually knowing the experiences, because my friends and family will read these books and say to me, that would never happen. Or, yeah, that's pretty dead on. So I'm very fortunate to have a support system that supports me while I write love stories supporting them. And if you have a problem with that, just go ahead and unsubscribe, because hate does not live here, and it will not live here. Moving on. So after a while, my editor left Total eBound and moved to a publishing house in the US. And I followed her because I knew that this woman was going to be incredibly important in my life. I knew it. And so I followed her, and Total eBound very nicely gave me the rights to my books back, and I was able to move them over to Resplendence Publishing, and I wrote a ton of books for them. I tried to find like how many books I had written for them, and I can't find it. I don't know. It was a lot. 30 maybe over the course of however many years. I'm really bad at I have all of the information in this box over here, but I'm really bad at organizing it in a way that's going to help me find it when I want it. So I wrote a bunch of books for them, but then they went out of business and I had a decision to make. Did I find a new indie publisher that would take my backlist and continue to publish for me, or did I bet on myself and take a chance on self-publishing? By the time this happened, there was way less stigma around self-publishing than there was way back in the day. So it wasn't as scary as it might have been. But it's a ton of work, and it's expensive because you got to pay for cover art because you get that shit for free with a publisher, but you have to pay to have cover art created. You have to pay for editing, which is included when you have a publisher. You have to, pay for formatting. Like there's all these costs involved in self-publishing, especially at the start. So it was a tough choice, but obviously I did decide to self-publish. And I want to say 2015, 2016, somewhere around there, probably 2015. That sounds right. So we worked out with the old publisher that we could keep our covers. So I got to get out of that cost. And those books were already edited. So when I put them out, I didn't have editing costs because they had already been edited. So it was going to be everything new moving forward. And I worked out a deal with my editor, who was at this point my best friend now. We had fully developed our friendship. She lives in Grand Rapids. I live in Metro Detroit, so at least we're in the same state. Back before I was afraid to drive, I would see her way more often than I get to see her now. I haven't seen her in years, and it breaks my heart. But we talk all day long in Messenger, and we talk on the phone, and she is my best friend, and I love her. And the random chance of her finding me on Blogger has led to one of the best and only female friendships I have in real life. So we'll forever be grateful to have her in my life. I love her. So she worked with me to edit my books, so I didn't have to worry about that immense cost, and I was still putting out quality books. And I did. Holy moly. I cranked books because when we look back on things that we did, it is so easy to find the mistakes. Much easier than finding typos. Generally, those are not all found until the book is published and in people's hands, and you get reviews like, did anybody edit this? And it's like, yes, it was edited to death. Anyway, it is easy to look back and see the mistakes. the things that you would have done differently. I honestly believe that had I self-published sooner, I would be further along in my career. Because back when self-publishing was the wild, wild west, there was not the competition. There was not the flood of inexperienced authors. There was not the flood of, well, there certainly wasn't the flood of AI garbage. And it was easier for people to take a chance on an independent author back then than it is now. There's so many options, there's so much competition, and there's so many bad books available because the path to self-publishing is relatively easy. So your book doesn't have to be good to get published anymore. And some people don't care about the quality of their books. They just pump them out and put them out. And so people are less likely to take a chance on authors they've never heard of because they don't know what they're getting into, is my point. So had I self-published sooner, I think monetarily my career would have been different. The second biggest mistake that I made in my publishing career was chasing what was hot at the time, because it was only hot in the circles I ran in. So short, double virgin, safe. Short, safe, double virgin romance. That was the trope I chased, because in the circles I was in on social media, that's what was wanted by, 5,000 people. So I cranked out safe, double virgin, short romances. And I pumped them out, because they were easy, because there was nothing to them. There was no angst. There was no drama. They were just formulaic, which, to be fair, all romances are a formula. They really are. There are no original plots. They're all a hero's journey. Every single one. Harry Potter and Star Wars are the exact same story. What makes them different are the characters. What makes them different? The journey is different, but the plot is the same, because all stories are the same. There are no original stories. There are only original characters. And those are the gifts we are given. We are given the gift of characters to write the romance, because you have the meet cute. You have the journey into different. You have the midpoint. You have the black moment. And then you have the happily ever after. And those are the 5 points of every romance story. And let me tell you what, if they don't happily ever after, or at the very least happily for now, it is not a romance. A romance requires that couple to be together at the end of the book. If it's a series and there's cliffhanger, not a fan. But as long as at the end of the complete arc they're together, I guess fine, you can call it a love story. But it's not a romance if one of them dies. It's not a romance if they break up and there's no conclusion. There's no epilogue that shows them getting back together, whatever. A romance has to have a happily ever after. Oh my goodness, I can't even speak. It pisses me off so much when people call shit a romance, but the couple's not together at the end. That's not a romance. What the hell was I talking about? Formulas. So that's the formula of every story, right? Every romance. But it's so boiled down and condensed in these other books that I wrote. And some of them are very, very good. Some of these books that I wrote, not to toot my own horn, but I'm an author. I've been doing this for a really long time. Like, I know when what I write is good and when I write is just surfaceable. My Midwest Monsters series, I loved writing those books. Those books were so fun. They were so fun, and they're just feel good books. So if you read male-female romance, I'd be super honored if you would check out my Midwest Monsters. They're all paranormal, and they're just, that series I loved. I loved it so much I stayed in it for 16 books. It's my longest series, and I love those books. And some of them were not so great. Some of them were I just got to churn out a book. I just got to get something out. Boom, 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 boom. Plot points hit, put it out. And some of those are not published anymore because I wasn't proud of them. I was never proud of them. But I was chasing tropes. I was chasing guaranteed money was the problem. Because I would rather know that 700 people are going to read this book than put something out and not know if anyone's going to read it. So I chased that. And it's one of my biggest regrets because I'm just going to tell you the story. Why really it was my biggest mistake. I had a book go viral on TikTok. Someone read one of my short, I mean, you could barely call it a book. Like, it's a booklet. Like, it was super short. And it was short for a reason. But hang on. So someone on TikTok read that book. They loved it. And they made a TikTok. Hundreds of thousands of people watched that TikTok. The book is called The Pact. And it's fine. The story, the plot, is fantastic. And what I should do is take it and make it into a novel. But the story itself is like 15,000 words, maybe, 40 pages long. Hundreds of thousands of people learned my name because of that TikTok, because of that book. That book that is not even remotely indicative of how I write. But that's the book everybody read. And I'm grateful for the money that I made. I mean, it's a 40-page book in Kindle Unlimited. I made like 7 cents every time somebody read it. But I'm grateful, I am. But the people who read that book as the first book of mine they ever read have the impression that that's what all of my books are like. And they will never read another book from me again. That was 3-4 years ago, and it still eats at me. That tens of thousands of people read this book, and they think that is the prime example of what my books are like, because it's not. I wrote that book for a friend who was in chemo and could not handle long drawn out. Books couldn't hold her attention, so she needed short, direct, happily ever afters to get her through. And I wrote that book for her. And while we were talking about it in my group, other people wanted to read it, so I went ahead and published it instead of just sending it to her. No one had ever found all of my other books before, so it never occurred to me that someone would find this book that was written super short, super formulaic for a certain purpose. It never occurred to me that this would be the book that would blow up and turn away tens of thousands of potential readers. I will never be sorry I wrote that book, and she loved it, and that's all at the end of the day that I honestly care about. But it is a regret that the one time I went viral, it was for a book that is nothing like any other book that I wrote. It's the shortest book I ever wrote, and like I said, it was for a specific person for a specific purpose. And she's gone now, and who knows, maybe that was her way. Maybe she sent that to that TikToker, she did this for me, so let me do this for her. I don't know. It seems like something she'd do, though. But yeah, so that was another mistake. I mean, and it wasn't my mistake. I didn't make it go viral. It just, writing in that genre pigeonholed me. And even 5 years later, I'm still trying to break out of that and find an audience for the books that I write now. Because now I exclusively write male romance, because that is where I am happy. That is where my best work is. My best books out of I just finished Broken Chords. I did finish it. So it is live on my direct shop. It is up for pre-order at Amazon. I'm going to put links below. I doubt you're going to want to read it. It's the 4th book in a series, but whatever. I'm really happy. But that was my 130th solo authored book. I have written books with other people. I don't count those. So this was book number 130 that I have published. Out of 130 books, all of my best books are male, because that's where my heart lies. That's where my passion is. And that is where I decided a couple years ago, I'm just going to double down, and I'm going to focus here, because the majority of male readers do not read male-female, and vice versa. So I have confused my audience over the years, because I wrote in both under the same pen name, and that has caused confusion among readers, and I think that too has affected my income possibilities. Had I written one genre under one name and one genre under another name, if I had kept them separate, I think that I would have had a clearer path to success. But I didn't, because to me, love is love. I read both, but I am a unicorn apparently, because most readers don't. They fall into one or the other, and fine. That's fine. I cannot do anything about that now except build up my male readership and not write any more male-female romances as Dakota Rebel. If I get ideas that are male-female, I will probably start a new pen name and just start over, because, we know how much I love to just start over and make everything harder than it needs to be. So, I'm sorry, this video probably got really long, but you wanted to know, and it's release day, so let's just talk about it right now to get into more the process of how I do things. So Broken Chords is the 4th book in the Rock Hard series. The first book is Whiskey and Rye. And when I was writing Whiskey and Rye, I knew way back then, early last year, maybe even the year before, I knew I was going to write Broken Chords. I just didn't know where it was going to fall in the series, because it is the redemption arc of someone who did something horrible in book 1. And even as I was writing this horrible, horrible thing that Brandon did, I knew he was getting his own book. So it ended up being the 4th one. And it has taken me longer to write this book than it has ever taken me to write a book since that first word processor book, when I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I've never gone 6 months between releases since I have been published. It has been really, really difficult. But this book was really, really difficult, because it's very heavy. It's very serious subject matter. Brandon is in rehab for drug and alcohol abuse, and he falls in love with his doctor. So there's a lot, right? There's responsible discussion of drug use, and there's laws about doctor-patient relationships, and there's just Brandon. It's just Brandon being this messed up kid, and he's not a kid. He's 28, but there's all these things, and I stressed myself out trying to juggle all of these things when I should have just written the story, gotten everything I knew out, and then gone back. But I'm not great at drafting. And I think this is an ADHD thing where if I can't do it perfectly, I'm not going to do it. So when I write, I go back and read from the beginning 100 times while I'm writing, so that by the time I'm done, it is a final draft, because I have drafted as I'm writing. And I don't recommend that process. It's exhausting. And many writing experts will tell you not to do that. But it's just how I am. It's how I've always been. So once I get to the end of a book, it can go straight to copy edits, because it is as perfect as it's going to get, just by the nature of how I write. So this was just a really difficult book for me. Plus, it's not as spicy as the other books in the series, and I really worried about that too, because I have created this expectation of spice, and this book doesn't have that, because they're in a rehab facility for like most of the book, and they're not getting spicy in the rehab center. So there was a lot going on with this book, and it was very, very difficult for me. But it's done, and it's perfect, and it's out in the world, and I'm so happy. I'm so happy. And the next book in the series is called Lead Me Not, and I've already started making notes. I've already set up here, I'll show you. Since we're here, fuck it. This video's so long. If you're still here, you're probably okay with swearing. So, Lead Me Not. And I set up the pages in my writer's notebook. So I've got like my inspiration, some chapter stuff, and then my sprint pages. And I've got some notes for what the book's going to be about. And I have a long way to go, and I have to completely reset all the plot stuff I have up on the walls and the calendars and things, so that I can start all over fresh with a new book. New book ideas are very exciting. Actually writing the book, very daunting. But that, my dears, is my author journey. 130 books over 18 years. And I still don't make a lot of money. But that's not what it's about. It's a labor of love for me. And someday, who knows? Someday maybe a new TikToker will find a better book, and that will go viral, and I will go from here to true mid-list author, because I'm never going to be up here, and that's fine. I don't need to be up here. I would just like to not, stress out about money. So that is my story. And I hope that you had fun on this weird jaunt I took you on. This weird little meandering story about my writing career and my process. I do have a little bit of an update kind of for my reels for my Rebel family, that I have a job interview tomorrow, and I'm really excited, and I really want this job. So if you could send prayers or good vibes or whatever you believe in regards to the power of positivity, if you could put those out in the universe for me, because I really want this job, because writing doesn't pay the bills, man. And I haven't had like a job in a long time, and I need one. It is like, it's full-time and remote with benefits like a grown-up. And I really need benefits. I really need new glasses, and I'd like to get my teeth fixed. So insurance would be cool. So I will keep you updated on that, because if I get a full-time job, once again, things are going to change on the channel, because there's no way I can do 2 or 3 videos a week and work a full-time job. And my job will be my number 2 priority behind my family. So we'll keep you updated on that. But I did want to let you know and ask, please, send some positivity my way, because I really want this job. And that is all I have for you today. Hawk is dead asleep and snoring, so I'm sorry. I won't have any Hawk footage for you today because I don't want to bother him. But I hope that you are having a fantastic day. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you stuck around this long, I love you too, man. Don't forget to smash all those YouTube buttons for me, and I will see you next time.